So today's episode, we're looking at wrestlers who showed up in other promotions while working for another. That's a long title, but that's what I was aiming for.
Yeah, this is gonna be a good one because whether you call it the forbidden door, the prohibited portal, whatever you want to call it, this isn't anything new. This is something that's been going on for decades, and we're gonna take a look at some of that.
Yeah, that's the surprising thing when obviously I was putting this show together and obviously getting your feedback as well. Is like, this is more common than I actually thought. I didn't think it would be as common.
This was very common back in like the 80s and the 90s. I mean, it really was. We'll dig into all that, but yeah, we got a lot of examples, and we're gonna dig into it. But yeah, this was actually a very common. It was a lot more common back then than it is now, by far.
Absolutely. So we're talking, like I said, see who's on our list. We've got loads to talk about. As always, intern, roll the intro. And welcome to your Saturday night, evening, morning, wherever you are in the world, of this edition of the Magical Wrestling Podcast. I am, of course, one half of the host, Liam Wakeland.
And I am the effing expert, the historian of effing wrestling. I guess I could call myself that. I literally have a history degree. I'm the effing expert. I'm Mr. Isaacs. Hello, everybody.
Of course, Mr. Isaacs. I saw again, obviously, on your Facebook, you've been doing, obviously, martial arts. How's it going?
Oh, yeah. It was a great week, man. Learned some new triangle chokes, and I'm getting a lot better. I'm getting better. Like, I'm learning how to conserve my energy more when I'm rolling with people. And one of my training partners, he had me. He was on top of me. I swept him. I mounted him, and I held him there for like 3 minutes till the round was over.
I'm so glad you clarified everything what you just said there, because that sounded wrong.
I tried to put what's called an Ezekiel choke on him, where it's like you put an arm behind the head, neck, and you put this one under the jaw, and then you clamp it together, kind of like a reverse rear naked choke, but it's from like the top mount position. But he kept defending it. He was good at defending it. I never could finish him, but it was fantastic. Like I said, I'm getting better at conserving my energy and using technique over just raw strength, and that's key in jiu-jitsu. So I'm glad I'm kind of picking up on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of psychological stuff, obviously, with this as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's legitimately like a chess match. Like, you're trying to predict what the other guy's going to do, and then you got to counter it. And like, if he does this, you're going to try to do that. If he sticks his arm down on the mat, you got to throw a leg up and try to arm bar him real fast. I mean, it's just, you got to be methodical and think about what it is that you're doing.
Awesome. And outside of that, obviously, everything all right? Just your typical week?
Yeah, typical week. Busy as all hell. Always super, super busy. I didn't even have any time to do any show prep for this, so I didn't go back and watch anything. Everything that we're going to talk about is basically straight off my dome.
The good thing is, though, there's a great range of stuff. I mean, there's some stuff which I'm so happy you picked about. There's a couple which I wasn't obviously familiar with, so I had to do a quick research before I came on. But the one thing I like about this, obviously, list is we've not just gone from like 1 year, we've gone really throughout the whole years, to be honest.
Absolutely. I mean, kind of like we said in the opening, people act like that this is a new concept. People in wrestling going to other promotions and making appearances. It's not. This is something that's been going on for decades. And we got some good examples that range from like the early 80s on up to present day. And I think you're going to see that. Let's get some comments here. We got Noob in the house. Noob is always one of our number one fans. We're doing great, brother. We got Everything Pro Wrestling in the house. He says, he or she says, coming in to drop a like, fam, to support wrestling podcast community. Thank you very much, man. I'll be sure to pull your page up and subscribe to it as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Do you know what I mean? I actually love that. Do you know what I mean? Nice little comment, just to see. It makes you smile, just seeing stuff like that.
That's cool, man. And I'm all about supporting. Like, if you support me as a creator, I will support you as a creator 100%. So you got a subscription out of me as soon as the show's over, pal.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, obviously we're talking about obviously people who showed up in promotions while they're working for other promotions. Do you remember like your first time ever seeing that as a fan?
Oh, gee. Probably the first time that I ever really paid attention to it was, and we'll talk about it, is probably the Mike Awesome incident. Like that was
Hmm.
the first time I had seen it on television. Because I didn't really watch WWE in like '96 when the ECW invasion kind of happened. I didn't really see that. Of course, early WCW had a lot of New Japan guys come in. So I mean, I guess I could count that too. Guys like Tatsumi Fujinami and Jushin Thunder Liger, Great Muda. So I mean, I guess if you count Japan, maybe like the early '90s is when I first saw it.
Interesting, interesting. It's funny you said the Mike Awesome one because that was the first one which came to my mind because obviously we'll talk about it's on our list, but the impact of that was so huge. I mean, inside and outside.
It was it was a very interesting situation that we'll discuss in detail when it comes here. Because I remember everything about that. I got a lot to say about it.
And plus, I know you're a big, massive ECW fan, so I'm sure you've got
Absolutely.
loads to say.
Absolutely.
Uh, of course. So yeah, I mean, we've got no Magic Weekly news and stuff like that. Should we get straight to the main event?
Let's do it, brother.
Here we go.
The main event.
I've got me 1 foot going.
You got your one fuck to give. Just stick it in the machine and let's get going.
There we go. There we go. I love that. Oh dear. So yeah, what we've got is we've got 5 obviously each. Again, you guys know the spiel now. It's in no particular order. We've tried to keep them like following. It'll make sense. So I mean, I'll start off and then Mr. Isaac will take turn and vice versa. So I mean, we'll start off obviously with the big one, which has recently happened, and it's of course it's Grace in TNA. Now I remember waking up and seeing this, going, "What the hell has happened here? Has something gone off?" Mr. Isaac, it was so unexpected, so out of the blue. I mean, but it got a lot of people talking.
It was, yeah. I think that the obviously the precursor to this was her appearing at the Royal Rumble.
Mm-hmm.
And it had been kind of rumored for a while that TNA and WWE was going to have some kind of working relationship. But then Jordynne Grace shows up at the Royal Rumble, and everybody's like, "Whoa, that's interesting." And then recently, of course, she shows up in NXT, and I think she did a fantastic job. I watched her match with Roxanne Perez at the NXT Battleground event over the weekend. I thought it was really good. She had the nasty spot where her earring got ripped out. There was like blood everywhere. That was pretty harsh, but she kept it together and put on a damn good match. She looks amazing. She looks like a star. I think she's the perfect person for TNA to send over to be seen in NXT. Because I mean, she looks like a star. I would imagine WWE is going to snatch her up at some point. But this was interesting, and apparently an NXT talent went and challenged her last night at the TNA event. Yeah, I'm not a regular NXT guy, so I don't exactly know who she is, but yeah. So I mean, we're definitely seeing some collusion here with TNA and NXT. So I'm kind of curious to see where this goes and how deep this is going to go.
Yeah, do you think this is more interesting because obviously we've not seen WWE do many partnerships basically this turn of the year?
Yeah, I kind of think that there's just a change. I think with Vince being gone now, Vince had the philosophy that if it didn't happen in WWE, it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
That was always his philosophy, except for very early on, which we'll get to that because he did some work with Japan that we're going to talk about. But at least from, like 2000 on up, it's like if it didn't happen in WWE, it didn't exist. And I think that now that Vince is gone, Triple H is kind of more in tune with what younger wrestling fans like. And I think he knows that working with some of these smaller organizations, for one thing, it's going to make WWE look better to hardcore wrestling fans. And another, it's going to get the NXT talent a chance to intermingle with other people, other wrestlers with different training backgrounds, etc. And they can kind of maybe learn some new skills from somebody outside of NXT, kind of cross train a little bit. So I think it's a good thing. I think it's good for wrestling. I think it's good for WWE, particularly NXT.
Yeah, exactly. And I was talking to obviously Stevie, I remember before we came on the air, and he said that, do you think this is going to benefit obviously TNA? Because we know obviously we've been highly critical about the channel they're on. Do you know what I mean? The stuff like that. Do you think this is going to benefit them?
I don't see how it couldn't. I mean, to the degree to which it does benefit them, I don't know. I guess that remains to be seen. But I don't see how this couldn't at least be somewhat of a net positive for TNA. I mean, I guarantee it's at least getting them more clicks on social media, if nothing else. There's got to be some more engagement here as a result of this because TNA gets very, very piss poor viewership. Let's just be honest. NXT gets a lot. I mean, pretty much as many people watch NXT as watch AEW. You know, everybody close your ears. I know nobody wants to hear that, but that's just the truth. So, you know, when you get a program that's viewed by 700,000 people and TNA's viewed by what, maybe 20,000, if even that. I mean, there's bound to be a little bit of cross pollination there in viewership. So I think it could only be a net positive for TNA. How much? I don't know. It remains to be seen.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, apparently, I think it was the pay per view last night. Wasn't receptive. A lot of people didn't like it. Apparently, it's got bad reviews and stuff like that, and buys. Obviously, Jeff Hardy turned up, Tate Impact, we've just discussed. So, but this is not the first time we've seen this.
No, it's not. I mean, you know, obviously TNA wants to work with everybody. So we need help. Please work with us. You know, so I mean, they had the deal, which we'll talk about as well in one of my bullet points, where we'll talk about their deal that they had with AEW in the past. Which, you know, they got a little bit of a spike from. We'll get there. But yeah, I think TNA needs all the help they can get. So, you know, if NXT wants to align with them, I think they should do whatever NXT wants to do.
There you go. There you go. Right then. So next up is obviously one you chose.
Yeah, let me get the banner pulled up here. Speaking of, Kenny Omega and TNA. Now, well, it was just known as Impact then. They didn't have the TNA name at that time, but this was kind of the relationship that AEW had with Impact briefly, and this was during the pandemic, if I'm not mistaken, right? Wasn't this pandemic era? Yeah.
Yep.
So basically, there were a couple of AEW talents. I know Sammy Guevara went down there, didn't have a very great experience. Kenny Omega showed up, and you know, Kenny Omega had a good run in Impact. He was Impact World Champion, and you know, he had some damn good matches there. He had a really good, really bloody kind of like death match style match with Sami Callihan. I remember watching it. It was really good. Like I think Kenny Omega did a damn good job as the Impact World Champion. And this is when he was kind of doing his like belt collector gimmick, where he was like the AAA, like what is it, the Mega Champion, where he was their world champion. He was the Impact World Champion. And I think he was the AEW World Champion at the time, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right about that?
So yep.
Yeah, so I mean, he had kind of the belt collector, you know, Ultimo Dragon kind of gimmick, where, you know, he's coming out with a bunch of title belts and everything. And, you know, I thought this was cool, and I thought this was good for Impact. Impact spiked a pretty good rating during this. I think the rest of the relationship with AEW kind of sucked. Like, I don't think, you know, either party really benefited other than Omega being an Impact and kind of spiking the rating a little bit during that time. But, you follow Impact more than I do. Do you have any good memories of Kenny Omega and Impact?
Well, the funny thing is, I mean, I actually remember the whole how it all started when Don Callis, obviously from AEW, when they ran out the building, was like, "We'll see you on Tuesday night." Wait, AEW is on Wednesday. No, Tuesday night on Impact, and that literally, I remember the internet going absolute berserk, going, "Oh my god, Omega's going to show up on TNA." I mean, and I've got to be honest, I actually got pops because I like obviously TNA and stuff like I still do. Big fan of Omega, so it's like two things together. And yeah, you're right. It got a lot of people talking. I mean, I remember Matt Hardy, Private Party showing up, Tony Khan showing up, Jerry Lynn showing up. There's quite a few people, but for some reason, if you take the Kenny Omega thing out of that, other than that, it was kind of underwhelming to me.
It was. The only other thing I remember is the Good Brothers were on AEW TV for a while as like stooges for Omega. And then I remember Sammy Guevara went to TNA and like caused a big ruckus and refused to do something, and they basically told him to leave. And that was basically the extent of what I remember about Impact's relationship with AEW.
The other one I remember. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that this Omega part of being Impact champion was basically the only positive.
Yeah, the other thing I remember weirdly is when TNA hosted one of their pay-per-views at AEW's. Where were they thinking at Pandemic era? I can't remember the name. Daly's Place.
Yeah,
yeah. When they hosted one of their pay-per-views at the Daly's Place, which I thought was kind of interesting and stuff like that. But other than that, there wasn't really much exciting. So it was like I said, there was good parts, but there was also a lot of bad parts with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was just, and maybe you could chalk it up to just this was a pandemic era move. You know, maybe if this had been done in the live crowd era, it would have been a little different. Who knows? But I mean, it was kind of a nothing burger. I don't think either party really benefited much outside of Omega and Impact.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to head to obviously now up to Scotland now for ICW, and one of the biggest loud crowd reactions I ever saw was this guy showing up in ICW, Triple H. I don't know. Have you seen this clip, by the way?
I think I remember seeing it. Was this from a couple of years ago?
It wasn't too long ago, yeah.
Yeah. So didn't this kind of correlate to like ICW like joining the network or something like that, and you know, their shows being carried on the WWE network and Peacock now?
Yeah, it was something along them lines. I mean, but I just remember the big massive crowd reaction. I think Pete Dunne was obviously there as well. But when you think about with ICW, there's a lot of talent's obviously gone to WWE from there.
Yeah, absolutely. WWE had a very large interest in like the British independent scene there for a couple of years. You know, with NXT UK, which is obviously defunct now, and you know, I know they've done work with ICW here. So I think they're just kind of trying to keep a friendly pipeline over there, so that if there's any talent that might pique their interest, you know, they might have an in on possibly getting them, scouting them, and bringing them over to the States. I mean, I think it's a win-win. I think ICW gets a big pop. You know, they get social media clicks and everything because the game Triple H comes out on their stage, and WWE wins because it gives them a pipeline to future talent.
Yeah, and the good thing is, I mean, obviously, I'm going to say, obviously, in the UK, there's some great talent. Too many to name, but like I said, it's just if WWE snaps them up, it's going to be sad for us because we obviously connect them talent. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of young talent in the UK right now for us.
Yeah, and from what I had heard, NXT UK really kind of hurt the independent scene over there.
Massively.
So now that it's out of the way, is it kind of recovering a bit now?
Well, the thing is with the NXT UK, what obviously worse was you had all this talent under one banner, so you could only see them at that actual show. Now, obviously, NXT's like there. You've got this core of talent, which is obviously traveling up and down the UK. Again, there's too many to name, and there's obviously Rev Pro, obviously Progress is your main two shows, but there's also these small shows, Wrestling in Newcastle, which is obviously big for Stevie Aaron. NGW. I mean, there's even like more I've not even named there. Do you know what I mean? There's so many small promotions which don't get love.
And that's really cool because like the UK is not a big area. So like all these promotions being there, like there's got to be something close to you no matter where you live. Am I right?
The closest one to me is about 20 minutes away.
Nice. Okay.
But
yeah,
I'm one of these
awesome.
where it doesn't matter to me if it's an hour and a half, 2 hours away. I'll obviously travel because that's what I like to do. I mean, obviously, as you obviously know, talking to a lot of people as well. So you go and like support them. It's a great feeling, you know, and stuff like that.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that the scene's kind of coming back over there. I'm glad to hear it.
I'm sure if you ask obviously other people, like again, obviously Stevie Aaron obviously works a lot in the UK scene. He could probably tell you a lot more, do you know, than I know.
Yeah. Yeah. We might have to present that question to him at some point.
Absolutely, absolutely. So next up is obviously one of yours.
Yes. So around the mid 90s, probably about 96-ish, I believe is when this was. ECW kind of developed a working relationship with WWE, and this resulted in Jerry Lawler making appearances at ECW. So when ECW talent started showing up on Monday Night Raw,
Mhm.
Jerry Lawler kind of started a gimmick of calling it extremely crappy wrestling and saying none of them know how to wrestle and they just use weapons and they're garbage wrestlers and all that kind of stuff. And this ended up culminating in him actually being challenged and going to ECW. And he worked a match with Tommy Dreamer.
Mhm.
And, so you could see Jerry Lawler versus Tommy Dreamer in an ECW ring. But this was like prime heel Jerry Lawler. I mean, the promos that he would cut, just running down ECW. I mean, Jerry Lawler was a badass at cutting heel promos. Like he was
Mhm.
phenomenal at it. And he riled up that Philadelphia crowd like nobody else. And they hated him. And he even made an appearance again at ECW One Night Stand against Taz. And I mean, they were booing him, flipping him off, throwing shit at him. like he was a vicious heel in ECW. And it was just kind of a relationship that ECW had with WWE at the time. Vince McMahon gave Paul Heyman $1 million to kind of help fund ECW in return for a working relationship where he could take a couple of ECW talents and use them in WWE. And, it kind of became a small kind of feeder organization for a couple of years for WWE. So again, it's just one of those mutually beneficial things where, I'll give you this if you give me that. And this is just what we see all through this list that benefited both parties. And this is one of those.
Absolutely. Is this the one, correct me if I'm wrong, and this is where the lights went out about quite a few times and like people's trying to jump him?
I believe so, yeah. I'd have to go back and watch some of the clips. I haven't watched it in a while, but yeah. Lawler really got him riled up, as only he could do. So it was fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I mean, obviously, ECW is obviously always the great thing. I mean, but I mean, go say extreme crappy wrestling. I mean, a lot of fans obviously remember that and stuff like that. But I mean, it's ECW, man. Do you know what I mean? I don't think as a fan they don't get the love they deserve. Throughout history, in a way.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of modern fans that I don't think they understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think they understand that modern wrestling would not be here the way it is today without ECW.
Mm-hmm.
It just wouldn't. I mean, you could talk about how ECW didn't have great ratings and that they went out of business and yada, yada, yada. But if ECW hadn't been around, WCW would have never adopted the Cruiserweight division.
Mm-hmm.
WWE probably wouldn't have adopted like a hard R rating during the Attitude Era. ECW did both of those things first. And those two things, those two elements mixed together made pro wrestling super popular. And we see the remnants of it today. Like if that Cruiserweight style hadn't been shown to an American audience by Paul Heyman, would these guys be flipping on Dynamite every week?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, I think ECW changed wrestling, and modern day wrestling would not be what it is today without ECW's imprint. It just wouldn't.
Absolutely. Did you see the clip where Eric and obviously Bully Ray had a debate saying which company started the division first?
I don't know. I don't recall that. I'll have to check it out. What was Eric trying to say WCW started it?
Essentially, yes.
He's just going to pretend that Rey Mysterio versus Psychosis, which Meltzer gave 5 stars in ECW, by the way, didn't happen like a year prior in ECW than it did in WCW.
And well, that was the argument. Obviously, WCW obviously had 2 people. ECW had like a whole plethora of talent, for that type of division.
Yeah, I mean that Heyman was a trendsetter. He brought Deathmatch from Japan. He brought Lucha from Mexico, and like nobody else in America was doing that. So those 2 things were brought to America by Paul Heyman, and they were just kind of stuck around and went to the other promotions. And but Heyman's the one who brought it here.
There you go. So this next one kind of leads into what you've just said there. So we've seen WWE show up on ECW, but what about the other way around? What about ECW showing up on WWE? Rob Van Dam showing up in 1997. Now, I didn't know this, by the way. I had to obviously look this up, but yeah, I mean, this was apparently kind of like following on obviously from what you said there. I don't know if you know much about this.
It was the talent exchange. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the reason why Rob Van Dam still to this day calls himself Mr. Monday Night. He calls himself Mr. Monday Night because he appeared on Monday Night Raw and cut a promo saying that I'm here now. I'm Rob Van Dam. I'm now Mr. Monday Night. And that just stuck with him. You know, still to this day, he calls himself Mr. Monday Night. But yeah, this was just one of those talent exchanges. I think when he showed up on Raw, I believe he wrestled Jeff Hardy, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's who he wrestled. But yeah, this was kind of what kicked off the WWE's relationship with ECW, and which was huge. I mean, this was huge for wrestling. It was huge for ECW. And we kind of saw ECW guys kind of sort of invade WWE. I know Tommy Dreamer made appearances. And they kind of made it like the ECW guys were kind of unwelcome and were just showing up, you know, kind of gave like an invasion kind of aspect to it. You know, I wasn't regularly watching during this time, but I have gone back and seen some clips. And I read a great book called Hardcore History, the unauthorized history of ECW. And it goes over all this in detail. So I'd recommend anyone out there go read that if you haven't.
Interesting. And like you said, though, I mean, it's actually a great match, though. Obviously, Jeff Hardy's obviously great in the ring. Rob Van Dam, and these guys obviously had a rematch years later, and I feel like these two just work so well together overall.
Yeah, and their match at Invasion was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was a great match. The rematch they had at the WWE Invasion event where Rob Van Dam representing the Alliance went up against Jeff Hardy representing WWE. That was a great match. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Absolutely. So next one's obviously back to yourself.
All right. This one's kind of recent too. And it's Shayna Baszler at Josh Barnett's Bloodsport at GCW's The Collective the week of WrestleMania. Now, had you seen this, Liam, or did you know anything about this?
I knew about it. I've not obviously seen the match and stuff, but yeah, I mean, I remember seeing the thing announced for it, and I'm like, holy shit, what the hell's going on here?
So, Josh Barnett, former UFC heavyweight champion, you know, mixed martial artist, has also done a lot of pro wrestling in Japan. He's like a master of that shoot style of pro wrestling. He was trained by Billy Robinson, you know, British legend, shoot wrestling. And he wanted to bring kind of like that shoot wrestling element to shows here in America. So he created this Bloodsport event, and it's usually done in co-promotion with GCW, usually the week of WrestleMania, although I think he's doing one in Japan here in the next couple weeks. And Josh Barnett has a long-time relationship with Shayna Baszler. He was her MMA trainer for many years. I mean, Shayna Baszler's fought MMA since back in like the mid-2000s. I remember watching her way back then, you know, fight in Elite XC, which was an old defunct MMA organization where she got obliterated by Cyborg Santos, for anybody that knows MMA. But, I mean, she's been around a long time, and she was trained by Josh Barnett on how to be a fighter, and Josh Barnett also trained her to be a professional wrestler. So he taught her all these different skills that she has. So he wanted her for Bloodsport, and she's under WWE contract. Josh Barnett said in an interview that he personally called Triple H and asked for permission if he could use Shayna Baszler in Bloodsport, and Triple H said, yeah. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Nick Khan actually was at Bloodsport watching it.
I remember reading the thing that there was a WWE heavy talent there, you know, supporting obviously Shayna.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's really cool. And it's just another example of WWE kind of like being friendly with the independent scene, which is not something we've historically seen. So I thought this was really cool. I mean, Bloodsport's a really cool event anyways. It's kind of a worked shoot kind of environment. Kind of like the old, what was it? The name eludes me right now, but there was an organization in Japan in like the late 80s, early 90s that was doing this kind of style. You know, this kind of like shoot grappling and striking, but it was a work. That's kind of what this was, which was really cool. And Shayna kind of replicated it this past weekend at the NXT event with Lola Vice, who, of course, is Valerie Loretta, was a former Bellator fighter. They kind of replicated this too, where they did like a kind of work shoot kind of fight with no rings on the no ropes on the post, like in Bloodsport. They did a Bloodsport style match, basically. They call it NXT Underground, I think is what they called it. But it's really cool. It's kind of a unique perspective on professional wrestling, and I thought it was really cool that she was able to show up to this, and she beat Misha Slamovich. Obviously, the WWE talent's going to go over if they show up at an indie show.
Oh, absolutely. And the good thing is, I mean, I remember looking at the card for that. It was pretty stacked, even with this match.
I watched it. Yeah, I watched it. It was really good. It was a really good event. I enjoyed it.
I think I'm definitely going to check out. You said the one coming up with New Japan?
It's not with New Japan, but it's in Japan.
Okay.
I don't know who Josh Barnett's partnering with over there. It's not, I don't think it's GCW, and it's not New Japan. But yeah, he's running a Bloodsport event in Japan over the next couple of weeks. And so that should be pretty good.
Absolutely. The interesting thing is, I mean, I always remember like watching GCW for the first time, Dark Side of the Ring with obviously Nick Gage, and they've done some tremendous things, since that I was the episode aired.
Yeah, I mean, GCW has been like, they're basically the top independent organization in America. I mean, they really are. Like, I don't think there's an independent bigger than them in the US that I can recall. I think they're the most popular, and I'm not the biggest GCW fan. I like some of their stuff. Some of their stuff is just gaga horseshit, and some of their stuff's actually pretty good. I mean, it just depends. I mean, they have a wide variety of different styles. Like, they'll have a show that is kind of goofy and comedic, and then they'll have like a deathmatch show.
Yeah.
And then they'll have a show it's just like really good technical wrestling. And then they'll have a show based around high flyers. And it's like they kind of do a little bit of everything. So, I mean, props to them for that. GCW, I mean, they're a little hit and miss for me, but I love when they do these Bloodsport events, though. It's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. They've also done a partnership show with obviously one of our shows over here called TNT, which is basically our deathmatch style wrestling, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's obviously a great show. Obviously, I think Blake Christensen was obviously on that card. I can't remember exactly what the actual name of the event was, but it was a great event. But yeah, it's kind of like I said, TNT is kind of our version of GCW.
Oh, okay. Have you ever gone to one of those?
It's on my list to do. Like I said, at the minute, I'm trying to get to as many promotions as I can, but it is definitely on my list to go to.
Just be sure to cover your face when they're smashing those light tubes, because that poisonous dust from inside the light tube goes all over the place. And I'm like, oh my God. The only thing I could think my whole time is, you all are breathing that shit in, you're going to get cancer. Like, please stop. Stop with the light tubes. All right.
I'll be there with some like safety goggles or something like that, and like a face mask.
Yeah, you need to have like safety goggles and a face mask. If I see like an 8-foot tall ginger sitting in the crowd with a mask on and goggles, I'm gonna be like, there's my man right there.
Dear, this is brilliant. Right then, next up was obviously the biggest one, which was obviously discussed it briefly, and is of course Mike Awesome obviously returns to ECW. Now, Mr. Isaac, you're a big ECW fan, so for people listening, give them a little insight to obviously the backstory of Mike going to WCW.
So Mike Awesome, a tremendous talent, gone way too soon. Unfortunately, committed suicide, and he's no longer with us. But he was an amazing talent. And at this time, he was ECW heavyweight champion. And he had a contract dispute with ECW. And I know he wasn't very well liked for doing this. I mean, I know Joey Styles ran him down in the media, and some other people really had some negative things to say about him. Because as the ECW champion, he probably should have done the responsible thing and dropped the title before leaving. He did not. He took the ECW Heavyweight Championship belt and left because of a dispute he had with Paul Heyman. So he showed up on WCW Nitro, and he interfered in a match. I don't remember what it was, but he interfered in the match, and he had the ECW World Championship belt around his waist. So he was on Monday Nitro with the ECW heavyweight title belt, which of course the announcers didn't. They didn't say, "Hey, that's ECW," because they wouldn't. They would refer to ECW as Barbed Wire City, because that's what Raven called it when he first came in. They're like, "Oh, Raven used to be in Barbed Wire City," but they never would say the name ECW. So they wouldn't say what it was. They didn't even. I don't think they even acknowledged he was wearing it. But obviously, this royally pissed off ECW, and I believe they threatened legal action against him. Mm-hmm. And the way that they curtailed going to court was that Mike Awesome agreed to come back to an ECW show with WCW's permission and drop the ECW championship. Now, what they did, and I don't know why they made this decision. I guess just to kind of for a chance of co-promotion, or maybe this was just Heyman's way of sticking it to WCW. I don't know. But he brought a WWE guy, Taz, in, who of course was former ECW champion. Taz, with permission from WWE, went to ECW, beat Mike Awesome for the ECW championship. So a WCW contracted wrestler went up against a WWE contracted wrestler in an ECW ring for the ECW championship. This is a strange anomaly that you're never going to see again in pro wrestling.
Not at all. And I always remember the crowd reaction. Obviously, when Mike entered, it was hostile as hell. Let's be honest.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was hated. Absolutely. Like the ECW fans, and like I said, Joey Styles, even when One Night Stand went on and Mike Awesome was competing at One Night Stand, Joey Styles like ripped him, with shoot comments and commentary, called him unprofessional and an asshole and a piece of shit during his match because of what he did. Said that he would never forgive him for what he did to ECW. Massive heat.
I mean, credit to Mike himself for dropping the title and stuff like that. But it's just the fact that I completely forgot about the Taz situation as well. So it's kind of like him saying, "F you, Mike, I'm taking that title, but here you go, Taz."
I think so. I if I had to be a betting man, and I've never heard anybody say this directly, but I'd say this was Heyman's way of sticking it up Bischoff's ass.
Yeah.
Like, you took my champion, put him on Nitro. Well, guess what? I'm going to have him come back here, and I'm going to have him drop the belt to a WWE talent. What do you think about that? And then, of course, Taz ended up dropping it, shortly thereafter. I don't remember who he even dropped it to. But he did appear on SmackDown with it. He appeared on SmackDown as the ECW champion and went up against Triple H as the WWE champion. Tommy Dreamer tried to get involved and help him, but ultimately Taz lost because that was when Triple H beat everybody under the sun and buried everyone. But yeah, Taz actually had the ECW title on SmackDown. So it was on Nitro and it was on SmackDown within a few weeks.
Yeah, the most frustrating thing is for me, I mean, obviously Mike was a great talent. I'm a huge fan of obviously his work and stuff. But when he went back to WCW after this like shenanigans type thing, he was absolutely booked stupidly. Let's be honest.
God, don't get me started. Yeah, Mike Awesome was he was so good, man. Like he's legitimately one of the best big men that I think has ever existed in wrestling. Like, he was that good. He was phenomenal. He had a great body. He was strong. He was athletic. I don't know if you remember, he would do the top rope. He would do like a plancha over the top rope. His matches with Masato Tanaka in ECW are some of my favorite matches ever of any promotion. Still to this day. If anybody hasn't seen them, please do yourself a favor and go watch them because they're fantastic. Mike Awesome was an incredible talent. And when he went to WCW, he became the fat chick Thrilla. And they had him do this stupid hippie gimmick. And like, it was god awful. It was really awful. He wasn't a character style wrestler. He was a badass. That's what he should have been. But
Yeah, yeah. We like to say we could literally ramble on for a good hour about this, but unfortunately, we've got other things obviously to discuss. Now, this next one's obviously on your list. I will be honest, this is one I wasn't familiar with, so take it away.
Yeah, so this one is a manager appearing. Not a wrestler per se, but Evolve had, and it seems like nobody remembers this. I'm like one of the only people that seems to remember this, but Evolve had like a WWE Network special. And I think it ran concurrently with the first the first AEW show. Because they had a couple of shows on Bleacher Report very early on from Daly's Place. I think this coincided with the very first AEW event. I think that this Evolve event was on the same night. But they did a special Evolve event, which was fantastic if you haven't seen it. It was in Philadelphia. It was in what was known then as the ECW Arena, which I think has been torn down now. But there was an appearance from Paul Heyman. The lights went out in the middle of the show. It came on, and Paul Heyman was standing in the ring. And, of course, the crowd erupted. And he just kind of, gave a rah-rah speech about, how great Evolve is and how big Evolve was to American independent wrestling. And it was. Like, Evolve was, like, the big name in independent wrestling for many, many years. It was Evolve and Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. That was, like, the two big indies in America for a long time. Evolve is obviously defunct now. It was bought by WWE and went out of business. But the founder of it, Gabe Sapolsky, the owner and the booker, was also one of the founders and the booker of Ring of Honor up until it was sold. So he had a big hand in starting Ring of Honor. But do you know what Gabe Sapolsky did before that?
Evolve?
Before Ring of Honor?
I have no idea, I'll be honest with you.
He was the executive assistant to Paul Heyman in ECW.
Oh, okay.
So, again, people want to deny ECW's imprint on professional wrestling. Gabe Sapolsky, who was the creative mind behind Ring of Honor and went on to start Evolve and launched a lot of people's careers that we see today in AEW and WWE, learned booking philosophy and professional wrestling from Paul Heyman. He was a Paul Heyman student, a protege, which is why Paul Heyman appeared on Evolve, because he mentioned that he was so proud of Gabe. He taught Gabe what he knew about pro wrestling, and Gabe went on to be one of the biggest names in independent wrestling. A brilliant wrestling mind of his own. And I just thought this was a really cool moment. Heyman kind of coming back and addressing the crowd in Philadelphia. And it was kind of a full circle moment of, ECW died a long time ago, but the imprint's still here. And it's always going to be. So there's a little history lesson for you. Like, we wouldn't have had Ring of Honor. We wouldn't have had Evolve. None of that would have happened if we hadn't had ECW first.
I mean, it's safe to say Paul is probably one of the top learning trees, like you just mentioned there.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean, pro wrestling today would not exist the way it does without Paul Heyman.
No, just exactly. Wouldn't. And the other name which obviously gets thrown around a lot is Vern Gagne as well. If I said that right.
Yeah. I mean, the AWA was big. Yeah, absolutely.
So, but yeah, I mean, like I said, I didn't know obviously the back thing with Evolve, but now you obviously mentioned it. I think that's absolutely great. They obviously showed up and stuff. But yeah, anything to add on that before we move on?
Well, Evolve obviously is defunct now. They sold to WWE, and when the pandemic was going on, they had talked about bringing Evolve back as a separate brand, kind of to run adjacent to NXT, and then it just ended up not happening. And then Sapolsky, I think, ended up getting let go by WWE, and that pretty much was history at that point. But they were using some WWE talent, the Street Profits. Before the Street Profits were on NXT TV, they were the Evolve Tag Team Champions as WWE contracted talent.
I'm gonna have to have a look at this. I'm gonna have to look into this, obviously, Evolve, because I don't know obviously much about it. But I mean,
well, a lot of the archive of it is on the WWE Network or Peacock if you're here. So you can watch a lot of the early shows. There's a lot of early Bryan Danielson matches on there that are really good. Claudio, Brody Lee. Brody Lee was in Evolve, had a lot of matches. Sami Zayn as El Generico. I mean, there were some great matches in Evolve.
Interesting. That's really obviously. 45 minutes in, we've learned something new, so I'm happy. Dear. So this next one, it kind of happened around the same year I was born, but obviously I wanted to look into it. And of course, have you heard of obviously the USWA? Now, Vince made a nice little surprise appearance there, and a couple of few other guys with a feud with Jerry Lawler. I don't know why I've got that image.
It looks like a cartoon sketch or something, but that's interesting.
But yeah, I mean, Vince obviously showed up in the USWA, and this was actually first time people got to see heel Vince. This was before obviously the whole Bret type thing. So again, this is obviously something I've learned, in doing this episode.
Yeah, this is when Vince McMahon was still just a commentator for WWE. Like, I mean, kayfabe, obviously he run the promotion and owned it the whole time he's been there, but in kayfabe, he was just a commentator. That's all he was. But when he went down to USWA in Memphis and he started a relationship there with Jerry Jarrett, and we'll get into why that was here in a minute. He showed up as like the evil guy that owns the big company that looks down upon USWA. And I mean, that's what he was. I've seen clips of it. I don't know a ton about what happened here with Vince and USWA, but I know he would make you could find video promos of him, talking about how dumb the people of Tennessee are, and I mean, it's real funny stuff if you go look it up. But this started a relationship between Vince McMahon and Jerry Jarrett, because this was around the time of the steroid trial, right? And Vince McMahon's backup plan was that if he got arrested and got put in prison during the steroid trial, that Jerry Jarrett was going to come and take over as booker of WWE.
Oh, interesting.
That was the idea here. Yeah, you can look this up. This has been talked about. So this is why Vince built this relationship with Jerry Jarrett, because he wanted Jerry Jarrett to be his replacement as booker of WWE if he went to prison. Like, that was the plan. And this was part of setting that in motion, was creating this relationship with Jerry Jarrett.
Interesting. So I was just reading obviously what Stevie Aaron sent me about this, and it says, feuding with Jerry whilst Vince and Lawler did commentary for WWF Superstars, but it was never acknowledged on WWF TV.
Yeah, they never acknowledged it. No. Because again, if it didn't happen in WWE, it didn't happen anywhere, right? This was kind of during that time. But yeah, this is the time when Jerry Lawler started with WWE as well, as kind of that exchange. We'll give you Lawler, you come here, and then I'll come there if you go to prison. It was just a you scratch my back, I scratch yours situation. This was just one of those kind of relationships. And yeah, this is how we ended up getting Jerry Lawler in WWE.
But apparently as well, you wouldn't know this unless you didn't have the USWA TV. So that's probably another reason why it wasn't obviously well known, for like the audience.
Yeah, it was just a local TV product. Yeah, in the Memphis area and surrounding areas. So I mean, if you weren't there to see it, you didn't know what happened. So they could go on Monday Night Raw or Superstars or whatever. I don't think Raw was around yet, but they would go to Superstars and just pretend that it never happened. Vince McMahon's back to being the all right, would you look at that commentator, and Jerry Lawler's there then as the heel.
Yeah, exactly. And I've just
even though he was the number one baby face in Memphis.
Absolutely. I mean, there was some great names showed up there. Macho Man obviously showed up as well. I've just read that.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with a lot of the other interactions that they had, but I just know the kind of general gist of why it happened. But yeah, Jerry Jarrett was going to run WWE if Vince went to prison.
Wow.
Jerry Jarrett, who later went on to found TNA, mind you.
I think that's why he founded TNA, if I remember rightly.
Possibly. Well, he founded TNA because WCW went out of business and it created a gap in the marketplace. But yeah, Jerry Jarrett, who ran the Memphis territory, was going to run WWE, didn't run WWE, ended up starting TNA with his son Jeff later whenever WCW went out of business. So there's all kinds of intermingling of wrestling history here.
Absolutely. So, right, we've got one more on your list.
All right. And this one, I found this one to be fascinating. This one was kind of something I just stumbled upon when I was watching New Japan World. This is when I was sick with COVID. I had COVID. I was sitting at home sick, deathly ill, like 104-degree temperature. And I was like, you know what? You know what would make me feel better right now? I'm going to watch some Japanese wrestling. And so I started just looking up some old New Japan matches. As a historian, I want to watch the old stuff and see what was going on. And I found that Bob Backlund, who was the WWF champion at the time, wrestled some matches in New Japan. So Bob Backlund defended the WWF championship in New Japan against Antonio Inoki. And if you look this match up, it was absolutely phenomenal. It was a great match. It was a very technical back and forth. These two were in their athletic prime back then. Dude, this was a great match. Bob Backlund and Antonio Inoki. They had a couple of matches. I would recommend going and checking them out if you can, because they were great. Inoki actually beat Backlund for the title, but it was it wasn't recognized.
Yeah.
WWF didn't recognize it, and then Bob Backlund ended up winning it back and coming back to the States with it. Again, if it didn't happen to WWE, it didn't happen anywhere.
Yeah, the funny thing is, when I obviously, Google this, that was the first thing that would come up, saying, why is this like title reign not obviously recognized by WWE? So the fact you just mentioned that, do you actually know why that actually is?
That I don't. I mean, I assume they just didn't want to put over that Inoki was a champion. Maybe they thought the American crowd wouldn't know who Inoki was. I don't know. But for whatever reason, they didn't want to recognize that Inoki had been champion, and they quickly put it back on Backlund, and who came back to the States with it like he never lost it. But this has happened. This has kind of happened a couple times before. I mean, there was a really, really short Kerry Von Erich NWA championship run where he beat Ric Flair in All Japan and then dropped it like, I don't know, a week later or something. That's like barely recognized. But yeah, a lot of times that they had this, well, if it happened in Japan, nobody will know about it here, so let's just pretend it didn't happen kind of spiel.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird one. Now, the funny thing is, there was so many more we didn't even add on the list. The ones obviously that caught my eye was Gunther in WXW, CM Punk obviously with Ring of Honor. There was another one, Apollo Crews. There was Owen Hart. There was quite a few names really. Shawn Michaels. There was so many.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been the Shawn Michaels one. Was that the one where he wrestled once for his promotion that he had? The lost Shawn Michaels match. Is that the one you're talking about?
I'm not quite sure. I just saw the initial things. I'd have to obviously go back and look that up. But yeah, it was something along those lines.
Yeah, he had an independent promotion in Texas that was short-lived when he had a wrestling school, which is Bryan Danielson trained under him, mind you. That's how he became a professional wrestler. But this is after he had left WWE due to injury. He wrestled one match for his own independent promotion in Texas. So that's like, as far as I know, that's the one big match he's had outside of WWE since he started in WWE. So that's interesting.
Absolutely. And the funny thing is, obviously, we've seen many combinations: ECW, WWE, WWE, TNA. Do you know what I mean? The list is endless. Do you honestly think we'll ever see WWE and AEW?
I doubt it. I doubt it because of the fact that they're both on major cable networks. And I don't think those major cable networks are going to want to see their products intermingle. For that reason, I don't think that we're going to see AEW and WWE work together.
I think that's a fair comment. What do you think companies can learn from, obviously, working with other promotions?
I mean, it's a quid pro quo, right? I mean, it's a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. I mean, if there's something that I can benefit from working with you and you have a different benefit you could get from working with me, let's make it happen. But it's got to make sense for all parties involved. And like we said, TNA's on a small channel. You know, they're not on a major channel, so the USA Network's not going to flip out if NXT talent intermingles with them. But if TNA was on, I don't know, the Paramount Network, the former Spike TV, I don't think the USA Network would be too kind about this. So
No.
it just, there's a lot of politics at play here, but you know, if companies can make it work, it can be mutually beneficial to both parties. So it is nice to see. I don't think we're going to see it with the big dogs. I don't think AEW and WWE is going to work together, but who the hell knows? I mean, I don't know. Maybe sometime down the road they'll figure out a way to make it happen, but I kind of doubt it.
No, I don't think at all. Let's balance it out a little bit. Do you see any negatives? Do you know what I mean? We've obviously talked about positives, but I obviously want to balance this out.
Well, if you take one of your top stars and send them to another organization and they get injured,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big deal, right? Like, you know, if WWE sent Drew McIntyre, and this wouldn't happen, but if they sent Drew McIntyre to AEW and he blows out an ACL in the middle of a match with Hangman Page, you know, and then he has to sit out for a year, I think that's not very beneficial to WWE. Like, that's the big thing. If you send a guy or girl over to another company to make an appearance there, and if they end up having a very bad injury or something, then that was a gamble that you took that didn't pay off. That's the big negative to me. Other than that, you know, unless network politics get involved, I'm not sure that there really is a major negative.
None at all. Let's do a bit of fantasy booking, obviously, to pass a bit of time. Can you put together 2 matches with people like from different promotions? Let's go. So you take one from one promotion. Yeah, so like one from MLW or something and one from like TNA as an example.
Oh, well. Let's take Alexander Hammerstone. And let's put him against. Oh, geez. Does it have to be like a small organization, or can it be like
any promotion?
Any promotion. Okay. So let's do Alexander Hammerstone versus Drew McIntyre. Let's do that. 2 big guys that would just club the hell out of each other. Let's do that, and let's put that on a major show. I'd like to see that.
Okay. So I'm going to go for obviously 2 promotions to work together, which I've not actually seen yet. I'd like to see MLW do a bit of work with TNA. For me,
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's 2, obviously, I think the 2 in the same like predicament in a way. Do you know what I mean? Small networks and stuff like that. Ross is pretty small. They've got some great talent on both products.
I think that would be a good move. MLW's got Matt Riddle. You know, you could put Matt Riddle up against Josh Alexander.
Yeah,
that would be a fantastic match. Like, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see Matt Riddle and Josh Alexander. How about that? That'd be good.
Absolutely. I was just thinking then, promotion-wise, we've obviously seen so many combinations of what we talked about today, but we've never seen MLW do obviously work, you know, with like other promotions.
No, and I think it's just because MLW just doesn't have a strong foothold right now in wrestling. I've said this before, but I would say that Court Bauer and Billy Corgan probably have like voodoo dolls of Tony Khan, because AEW completely killed either one of them. Like, their chances of being a viable WWE alternative died when AEW started. Let's just be honest.
But the one thing that obviously NWA has got over AEW at any time is obviously the history.
Well, they do, but they don't own like hardly any of the old tape library, though. all the old territories belong to WWE. So, I mean, they have the name NWA, and they have the title belt, but they don't have much else, unfortunately. So, you know, I don't think, you know, when AEW came along, I think it kind of knocked their chances of becoming like a really, really viable like number 2. That's not going to happen as long as AEW is around, funded by a billionaire. That's just not going to happen. Billy Corgan's not going to be able to compete. He's a rich dude. He's not that rich. And Court Bauer's not going to be able to compete either. They just don't have the kind of money to go up against AEW or WWE. So it would have been an interesting what if. If
Yeah.
AEW had never started, could NWA or MLW had gone up to that point? That's a what if that we can examine sometime.
That could even be a show like 10 what ifs.
Absolutely.
I like that. Like, what if, like, I don't know, WCW won the Monday Night Wars or something as an example?
What if ECW had never gone out of business?
Do you know what? I think we've got next week's show planned.
I mean, there's a lot of like what ifs. Like, what
Mhm.
if Vince McMahon had gone to prison for the steroid trial and Jerry Jarrett had taken over?
There you go. There you go. Should we do that? Should we do that next week?
We can do that.
So, are we doing 10 what ifs or 15 what ifs? What should we do?
I don't know if we. I think 10 would probably be enough. Like
Okay.
we'd probably get a huge conversation even out of just 5.
Okay. Okay. So there you go. Next week's show we're doing is what if. So we're gonna have 10 questions. What if this thing happened? We'll have a discussion. Might even get a couple of guests and see what we can do.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a fun concept. I like that.
Absolutely. And you've just come up with this concept, by the way. This is nothing to do with me.
Yeah, we do a lot of this on the fly, which is great. That's how I like to do this. I like to do these things on the fly.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, we'll obviously wrap today's obviously show. Now, you guys obviously know I've been doing a lot of wrestling interviews and that, so we've got 3 more obviously in the pipeline. So on Monday, I'll chat to Zoe Nix. Now she's obviously again up and coming. I recently spoke to Marty McAllister from Scotland, which means I'm heading back to Scotland to speak to the other champion in Robbie Cardwell. And on the 25th of next month, I'm actually quite scared on this one, but I'm going to do it anyway. Isaac North, one of the best characters in the UK right now, is coming. And we mentioned obviously wrestling in Newcastle. We've got a nice little pre-show coming up on the 18th of July featuring Stevie Aaron and the GM from Wrestling in Newcastle. Going to be looking ahead to that actual show. Man, busy.
Very exciting, man. That's all big stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you guys obviously want to support the show. We've got you covered, right? You don't have to search anything. You just got to do one little thing. You see this little QR code right here? If you scan this will take you to our link tree where you've got all our YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, absolutely everything. It's great that everything's in one place, right, Mr. Isaacs?
Absolutely. And I do have to say, there is a new Mr. Isaacs t-shirt on Pro Wrestling Tees. So if you're a big fan of the Effing Expert, you can go buy a t-shirt and you can wear my big eyeball on your chest.
If you just sent me the thing, I could have posted it on the thing. I didn't realize.
Oh, you didn't know I had the shirt up now? It just went
I did
up.
not.
I'll send it to you after the show. I kind of forgot about it, or I would have sent it to you beforehand.
Not at all. I would like to say we'll upload that obviously for next week. Yeah, I mean, guys, as always, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us. Mr. Isaacs, you know this every week now. See us out to the outro.
All right, guys. We all got to hang in there. We all got to support each other. I'm going to keep this short and sweet because I know everybody's probably wanting to go watch Clash at the Castle. But we're entering it. We're in summer now, guys. The sun's shining. Everything is going to be okay. Whatever issue you've got going on, you can persevere. You can get through it. Put that fist in the air. Remember, guys, just keep fighting.